Hello, everybody. It's me again. I'm going to do one more poem with you, which is Those Winter Sundays by Robert Hayden. And I'm going to again refer to the annotation guide or the annotation bookmark that I gave you. One of the first things I want you to notice, obviously, is it's called Those Winter Sundays. One of the biggest things is that I'm going to begin and look for a rhyme scheme. I'm going to read the poem out loud. This also is a poem that you can find um, on YouTube, read by the author. And as you can see here, the poem didn't print all the way, so I added the final line here. I had to write it. But the first thing I want you to notice is that it is 14 lines. Automatically, one of the first things you should note, I'm going to see if I can't zoom out this just a tiny little bit because it is, oh, that's out of focus. I'm still trying to, let's see here. Let me see, get that. Maybe if I pull that up a little bit more. Okay. I'm just going to have to move the paper up and down. So I'm sorry. But it's 14 lines. A 14-line poem automatically, if you didn't study these in high school, it has 14 lines. So anything that has 14 lines is automatically labeled as a sonnet. Now, Shakespeare is most known for writing sonnets, 14 lines, but it had a specific rhyme scheme. So I'm going to look to see if I've got a rhyme scheme here. But this, by definition, because it is 14 lines, is a sonnet. Is it a Shakespearean sonnet? Well, Shakespearean sonnet has a very specific rhyme scheme, which is A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, and then G, G. It always ends with a rhyming couplet. So I'm going to read this out loud, and then we are going to again look and see if there's a rhyme scheme or if there's anything we can ascertain from it, and try to see if we can figure out the meaning of this poem. So this is called Those Winter Sundays by Robert Hayden. Sundays, too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue black cold. Then, with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather made banked fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. I'd wake and hear the cold splintering, breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house. Speaking indifferently to him, who had driven out the cold, and polished my good shoes as well. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? So, looking at this, I'm looking to try to see if I can ascertain if there's any sort of rhyme scheme, and there's not. So, this is a sonnet by definition because it's 14 lines, but the poem type is actually in free verse. And that means that there is no rhyming end rhyme in the poem. It is free verse. It is a free verse sonnet. So if you were going to determine the type of poem it would be, you would say that it is a free verse sonnet. So there's no way to do, you would go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, literally, because there's not any sort of rhyme scheme. There's not even near rhyme here. So with that being said, I'm not even going to attempt to try to do the rhyme scheme. We've determined the poem type. So now we're going to look for words and phrases that we don't know. And these are pretty common words in here. The only word that I can see here is in line 14 that is not an everyday vernacular, and that's the word austere. So um, I am just going to draw a line down here and tell you the definition of austere, and the meaning of the word austere is actually strict or severe. So now you know what the word austere means. And now we're going to look for sound devices. Now, remember, those are things like alliteration, and looking for things like consonants. She sells seashells down by the seashore. This poem is actually rife with sound devices. There's a lot of them in here. So, looking through this, I'm going to pull out my lavender marker here because everybody knows I love purple, right? So I'm going to see if I can find some alliteration. And that is squiggle line. So blue black is alliteration. And then weekday weather is also alliteration. Banked blaze is alliteration. Well, love and lonely really is also alliteration. So I'm just going to draw a squiggly line here and I'm going to put alliteration, because if I wrote it everywhere that there's alliteration in the poem, then it would be all over the place. So I'm just going to bam, draw a line, bam, draw a line, and then connect that line there. And then here at the bottom, I'm also going to write alliteration. So there is a lot of sound device, are a lot of sound devices present in this particular poem. So we have blue black, weekday weather, banked fires blaze, loves, and lonely. So looking at that immediately, that is an intent of the author. Now, we're going to look next to see for figurative language. So we're looking for similes and metaphors, and even things such as paradox. So, kind of looking here, the first thing I notice here is the word Sundays. So, every day ends in Y, right? So, I'm going to put here with Sundays, and I'm circling even though I shouldn't be. I'm going to put Sundays too, and I'm going to write every day, because Sunday is typically a day of rest, right? So looking at that, I'm immediately going to look um, for more figurative language. Cracked hands that ache. That really is more imagery. So I'm going to box that in. I'm going to take my green pen marker, and I'm going to box that in, because to me that paints a very vivid picture. Um, and then the cold splintering and breaking also paints a very vivid picture. Um, and then that's really about all I can certainly think. Now, here, the final line in the poem, loves austere and lonely offices. This is actually figurative language because it is metaphorical. It's also personification, because it's saying that love is lonely and it's also an office. And I mean, I suppose you could say that, but and certainly in that sense, I think it's more metaphorical. Now, I'm going to look for repeated words and phrases. So, handy dandy highlighter here, um, and see if there's anything that is repetitive. Let's see here. Well, the word cold is repeated, so I'm going to highlight cold, um, because that is very much um, repeated. It's repeated twice. Um, but it's also really, really important to note that um, it's takes place in the winter. So I'm going to also, just like I did with my Papa's Waltz, I think that's really important to note that that depicts a vivid setting as well, wintering. And there's cold again. So cold is actually in this poem 3 times. So looking at that, I think that's also super, super important. And then looking at a couple of different things as well, we want to look and see. Also, we want to look to find out if there are any emotionally charged words here. So um, I think that, again, this is extremely personal for different people. Different people will have different reactions to this. So, again, um, certain words that will have an emotional connection with me may not have an emotional connection with others. So I'm going to look and see. To me, this whole phrase, no one ever thanked him, is very emotional. So I'm going to circle that. I'm also going to circle the word angers and chronic and indifferently. Um, and then again, I'm going to go back to the word love, which, like I told you earlier, can, and this is not really a circle, but you get the point, which is also squiggly line because it is alliteration. I'm also going to circle cracked because to me, again, that is an emotionally charged word. Fearing is also emotionally charged. So, really, this whole phrase here, this whole stanza, line 6 through 9, are very, very emotionally charged because to me, it implies splintering and breaking. So to me, I'm just going to draw and I'm going to ask a question or write an inference here. This whole stanza implies abuse. And I know that seems a little crazy, but it says fearing the chronic angers of that house. It says splintering and breaking. I know that he's referring to the colds, but it could also be referring to breaking of bones. But then, you also think and you look at as well, you're looking at a couple of different things. Um, you can also see the word chronic is very important because you can actually make the inference there that implies illness because chronic does make that inference. So, um, again, these are sort of normal responses. Normal things, but looking at this um, statement here, there's not a question mark, but it says, "What did I know? What did I know?" To me, says that quite possibly he is thinking as an adult. So, as a change from the poem that we just did, My Papa's Waltz, you have him thinking as an adult. Um, there's no metrical pattern in this poem, so it's kind of hard to really look at it. But, it has a lot of different aspects to it. You know, it says, Sundays too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue black cold. To me, that's a very vivid image. Growing up in Chicago, living in a very cold state, um, you know, and actually, I spent some time in Tennessee living in a house that had wood heat, and it was always cold. And my husband would get up and he would stoke up the fire. So immediately that makes me think. But it also says he had cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather. So it implies that his father, you can make the inference that this Robert Hayden's father did some manual labor here, but he made the banked fires blazed. And then again, this also, no one ever thanked him. He's thinking as an adult. So, even though this is a sonnet, looking at that, this particular poem is very reflective. So I'm going to write here in a little star and I'm going to say it's reflective, and quite possibly looking at just the different things. Possibly this particular poem was written after the death of a loved one. In this case, it would be his father, Robert Hayden's father, because it says, my father got up early. And then it says, no one ever thanked him, which is indicative of an adult thinking, because children don't necessarily say, thank you, Daddy, for making the fire nice and warm. And then it also says, what did I know? What did I know? So again, he's thinking as an adult. So in this particular poem, I would most definitely say it's reflective. And because I do have a little bit of knowledge there, most certainly, um, you know, it's it's a son um, narrating the poem. So you have a lot of that. And in this particular thing, this implies abuse, but it could also imply maybe divorce or death, because that's one of the first things that I think about. Why is his mother not in this poem? Why is he not talking about his mother? He's only talking about his father. So that's one of the questions that I would ask as well. Um, you know, and then you've got here, he says he polished his good shoes. Well, why would he polish his good shoes? Polish my good shoes for school or church, maybe. I mean, either one of those would certainly be important. You have here Sundays, it's also a specific time. So when I tell you that I have conversations with literature, I'm truly not kidding, because I look at it and I begin to break it down and analyze it as I go through to see what I can come up with. So, it kind of is a reflective poem. Chronic. The word chronic means constant. Sunday is a day of worship or a day of rest. So you do have a lot of that in your poem. Now, with that being said, um, you have a couple of lines in the poem here, even though there's no metrical pattern. So I'm going to make sure to make a note of that. There's no metrical pattern. And like I said, you can find a listening, the author actually reciting this poem on YouTube. There is no metrical pattern, but listening to it when the author reads it, it sounds a little more powerful, because again, you have the narrator is the son. And the son is actually telling a story. Now, knowing what I know about the author, Robert Hayden actually wrote this poem after his father had passed away. And his father did work a manual labor job. And so he was talking about, what did I know? What did I know? So he's looking back at his childhood, which is where the reflective aspect comes in. He's looking back at his childhood and he's thinking about all the times he should have thanked his father for what he did, but didn't. Now, was his father abusive towards him? His father might have possibly been strict or severe, because, again, what did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? Again, he is talking about how he didn't really know the sacrifices his father made for him. So, in that sense, I think that again, you're looking at the reflective aspect. If you're trying to find the overall theme of the poem, that is something first you're going to have to figure out the tone. And to me, I think the tone, and tone is oftentimes the hardest thing to find in a poem. But in this particular poem, because of the word choice and the diction, the way the author says things, you've got cracked hands, you've got no one ever thanked him, which makes it very reflective. And then, what did I know? What did I know? I think it is a tone of sadness and regret. So, in that sense, you have certainly a tone of sadness and regret. Now, after we have annotated all of these different things, and there are so many, um, you want to look um, and look at your notes. And again, like I said, your notes don't have to be identical to mine. You can write whatever you really want to, because, like I've told you before, annotation is a strictly very, very personal thing. So, with that being said, because it is so personal, um, you know, you've got here, what did I know? What did I know? Love's austere and lonely offices. What is the theme? What is the theme? Again, that goes back to what we were just talking about with my Papa's Waltz. It does bring you back to the theme of love, um, and parenthood, and the conflicted relationship between a parent and a child. Oftentimes there's misunderstandings and things of that nature. So I'm going to say, with just the short notes, I mean, you've only got 14 lines. And remember what I told you last Tuesday, it's easier to analyze poems that are longer than this, especially when you're having to write a 4-page paper. Now, this poem is oftentimes paired with my Papa's Waltz because they're both about fathers. And so you could compare and contrast the two. Whereas there was more of a playful tone in my Papa's Waltz, in this particular poem, you have a tone of sadness and regret, but your themes are very similar. Your devices and your diction are different because this one is a sonnet, but it's a free verse sonnet, but it also has the same theme, which is love and the conflicting relationship of parent and child. So I'm just going to put here, just from my annotations and the things that I have written down with the imagery and the definitive reflection here, is most definitely going to be the relationship, or the conflicting relationship of parent and child. So again, this could connect to a comparison and a contrast, because you can compare the similarities and contrast the differences of the two poems. But like I said, they're often paired together. So this is just an example. Again, another example of poem annotation for you to look at and to have and see, so that you are able to discuss the poems when we come back to class after this week. So I hope this has helped you in some way. Your next one that you need to read is My Last Duchess, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to annotate it using the annotation guide on your own. And then also Out by Robert Frost. And I told you from the beginning that that one has a very dark and ominous tone from the very first line, as we talked about in class. So anyway, one last look at those winter Sundays so that you've got that. Um, and I will also take a picture of this and post that on Brightspace as well for you. Hopefully that will help you as you are reading your poems and have some sort of an idea of how to annotate poetry and find meaning within it. Anyway, I will see you guys next Tuesday. And I hope you have a fantastic week. Don't forget to complete all your reading and begin to think about selecting what poem you're going to write about. Have a great night.